The United Kingdom has a long history of dealing with terrorism, but it has been its campaign against the Irish Republican Army, or IRA, that has had the most significant influence in the current British approach to counterterrorism. Terrorist attacks carried out by the IRA and the response by the British is what is often referred to as the Troubles, and it has resulted in the deaths of 3,000 civilians, around 600 soldiers, 300 policemen. In addition, 3,000 civilians were injured in violence related to the Troubles, not just in Northern Ireland and the UK, but the European continent as well. The British counterterrorism experience in Northern Europe resulted in a wealth of experience for the British military, police, and intelligence services in the 30 years that were the height of the Troubles. Because the IRA was active in both Northern Ireland and the UK mainland, these agencies gained knowledge and skills in conducting fast-paced covert investigations that could last for years or months. Second, because of the number of strategic and tactical mistakes by the various components of the British government in the early days of the Troubles, the British were able to develop a counterterrorism doctrine for the investigation of terrorism, including interagency committees, command groups, specialized training, and operationally tested techniques. The procedures originally established to respond to the IRA's threat have now been adopted to address the threat from Al-Qaeda and other affiliates and like-minded groups. The Troubles have helped create much of British counterterrorism's legislation. Like most countries, the UK's legal response to terrorism have been driven by attacks and the overall threat. In 1939, during the IRA's first campaign on the mainland, suspects could be held for 7 days without charges. This law was suspended in 1952. But was reintroduced in 1974 after an attack at a pub in Birmingham killed or wounded 200 civilians. The only caveat was the detention had to be with the consent of a magistrate judge. In 1991, members of the IRA fired a mortar at 10 Downing Street, home of the British Prime Minister, while he was having a cabinet meeting. As a result of this attack, the British Secret Service, MI5, assumed the lead in intelligence gathering and assessment of terrorism on the mainland. By 2002, it became apparent that terrorism was going to be a permanent fixture of life in the UK, and the Terrorism Act of 2002 was passed. In 2003, it was amended to lengthen the detention without charges to extend to 14 days, but still required a judge's approval. The length was extended again to 28 days in the wake of the 2005 London bombing. The London bombing heightened the fact that terrorist threat in the UK was now not from the IRA, but rather from Al-Qaeda affiliated organizations and like-minded individuals. In 2007, MI5 approximated that there were 2,000 extremists in 200 networks that in any one time could be plotting up to 30 attacks that represent a threat to life and property. There have also been numerous lone wolf attempts at terrorism, including the 2003 Woolwich attack. The UK has been a major source of funding for extremist organizations overseas and radicalized individuals within UK's Muslim community. And in addition, it has become a major source for recruits to their cause. In the UK, the most serious terrorist plots, those actually having a chance to be carried out successfully and causing severe loss of life or property, involved at least one plotter who traveled overseas where they would end up in terrorist training camps only to return home to the UK to begin preparation to execute attacks. In March 2004, the National Security Strategy of the UK was published and outlined the guiding principles that define the UK's counterterrorism strategy and objectives and the certainty of the risk. The strategic goal is to, and I quote, "At home, our aim should be that people are able to go about their business without fear and with a reasonable assurance of safety. Some risk is inevitable, and the government's role is to minimize and mitigate it. In order to tackle this security challenge in the long term and to address the causes of violent extremism both at home, the overseas, the UK pledged to support various international organizations' efforts to address terrorism while working bilaterally with its international partners such as the United States. At home, a partnership approach to challenge the nature of the threat and risk and improve the best ways to respond to them was the hallmark of their counterterrorism strategy. This required security agencies to partner with owners, operators of critical sites and essential services to improve resiliency, work with local authorities to plan for emergencies and counter violent extremism, and, within government, create a greater integration that cuts departmental lines in traditional policy areas ranging from intelligence and policing to building a wide range of capacities for dealing with the immediate threat. At the core of this counterterrorism strategy is what have become known as the 4 Ps. Prevent, counter-radicalization as a cause of extremism. Protect, defend critical national infrastructure in the UK's border. Prepare, develop a response to terrorist attacks in the UK. And pursue, detect, disrupt, and prosecute terrorists at home and abroad. Prevent involves reducing tensions within communities with regional and local governments, police, community groups, educational institutions, and the media all playing roles. It is the hope that by reducing tensions will result in long-term reduction of extreme radicalization which fuels terrorism in the UK. How does the UK hope to achieve this? Communicate directly with the people and the communities rather than address an entire group of people. Support common positions such as family, prosperity, opportunity, and freedom while denouncing violence. Fill in information gaps to counter myths and misconceptions about UK's policies and actions at home and abroad. And coordinate the prevent message across different governmental ministries. Protect is the second part of the UK's counterterrorism strategy and is easier to implement for several reasons. First reason is experience. The UK has considerable experience protecting key points during the Troubles. Next, the UK's national infrastructure, which is divided into 19 sectors and 565 critical key points of security, is coordinated by the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure, which is housed within the British Secret Service and is staffed by Secret Service officers and sector experts. UK Protect policy is not governed by threats, instead is developed on impact-driven, vulnerability-driven approaches, which ranks each key point on a critical scale in the event of a loss, ranging from catastrophic to minor with no impact on any sector. A security plan for key points is put into place based on this rating. Perhaps the most visible aspect of Prevent is the CC cameras around the UK. In fact, the UK has approximately 25% of the world's CCTV cameras. Another part of the strategy is not as easily seen. This is the sharing of threat intelligence throughout the sector's information exchanges. Third, the third part of UK's counterterrorism strategy is Prepare. Prepare also emerges from the UK's experience in the Troubles. It involves improving resiliency to terrorist attacks at the national, regional, and local levels, mitigating the consequences of attack, and responding to attacks on British citizens and interests abroad. The development of Prepare led to a fundamental reorganization of the UK's counterterrorism and law enforcement agencies. The Joint Terrorism Analyst Centre, or JTAC, was created as the UK's Centre for the Analysis and Assessment of International Terrorism. It was established in June 2003 and is based in the Security Services headquarters at the Thames House in London. The establishment of JTAC brought together counterterrorism expertise from the police, key governmental departments, and agencies. Collaborating in this way ensures that information is analyzed, processed, and shared on a regular basis with the involvement and consensus of all relative departments. JTAC's analysts and assessments integrate all intelligence related to international terrorism at home and overseas. It sets threat levels and issues warnings of threats and other terrorism-related subjects for customers from a wide range of government departments and agencies, as well as producing more in-depth reports on trends, terrorist networks, and capabilities. JTAC also has a law enforcement officer within its ranks that helps identify intelligence relevant to police officers and then converts that into usable, less sensitive formats. Another part of the reorganization was the forming of the Serious and Organized Crime Agency in 2002 by combining the National Criminal Intelligence Service, the Customs and Excise Enforcement Branch, and the Police Regional Crime Squads. While its primary mission is countering drugs and people smuggling, it regularly communicates with MI5 and local police regarding counterterrorism matters. In 2013, crime against children was added to their mission, and it was renamed the National Crime Agency of Britain. In 2008, the Customs and Immigration Service and police port units were merged to establish UK Border Agency, with the goal of enhancing the UK's border security against both criminals and terrorists. Pursue is the fourth and final part of the UK's national counterterrorism policy. The British domestic counterterrorism structure consists of four elements: the British Secret Service, known as MI5, which coordinates the collection and the assessment of all UK domestic counterterrorism intelligence; the special branches in each of the UK's police forces. These officers work in close cooperation with MI5 to collect counterterrorism intelligence within their local force areas. The Metropolitan Police Service's Counterterrorism Command. This unit, based in New Scotland Yard, coordinates the national police response to counterterrorism intelligence and supervises the collection of evidence for charging terrorists. And the Crown Prosecution Service. This is the legal branch of experienced lawyers called barristers, which receive counterterrorism evidence from police for prosecution of terrorists in court. MI5 is the UK's domestic security service, as opposed to MI6, the overseas intelligence collection agency. MI5 has primary responsibility for counterterrorism intelligence, counter-espionage, and counterintelligence within the UK itself. MI5 was established in 1909 and was primarily involved in counter-espionage, including the threat to Germany before and during World War I and II, and communism in the 1920s and 30s and throughout the Cold War. Its counterterrorism experience began in 1972 when it assumed the responsibilities for combating the IRA's activities in Europe, and assumed control of counterterrorism intelligence in the mainland after the mortar attack on 10 Downing Street mentioned earlier. MI5 officers have no arrest power and are not armed. This means that police agencies must be brought into the fold if any arrest and prosecution is to take place. This requires an interdependent relationship between itself and police forces when it comes to transnational crime, counterintelligence, counterespionage, and counterterrorism. The special branches are MI5's domestic partners in collecting national security intelligence. As mentioned earlier in this course, there are 56 police agencies in the UK, and they fall into four broad categories. Most police officers are members of territorial police forces. These are police forces that cover a police area or a particular region and have an independent police authority based on individual kingdoms. Special police forces, which are national police forces that have a specific non-regional jurisdiction, such as British Transportation Police, Ministry of Defence Police, Civil Nuclear Constabulary. Then there are the non-police law enforcement agencies, those whose officers are not police constables but still enforce laws. For example, employees of UK Border Agency may be immigration officers and or custom officers and hold certain powers of arrest, detention, and search. And then the miscellaneous police forces, most having their foundation in older legislation or common law. These have a responsibility to a specific location or area or activities and include the Metropolitan Police Office or the Greater Manchester Police as two examples. Each of these police forces in the UK is mandated to maintain a special branch. Special branch officers gather intelligence in support of the national security investigations and are granted special security clearances up to top secret. The special branches provide local policing expertise in their area of responsibility, serve as a conduit for human intelligence sources both within the target community and the population at large, serve as a conduit to the rest of the police force that may discover counterterrorism leads in the course of their duties, could provide local contingency counterterrorism plans in the event of a local threat becoming serious enough to require a major covert counterterrorism operation. In 2006, the Metropolitan Police Service's Special Branch was combined with the Anti-Terrorism Branch into the Counterterrorism Command that combined the intelligence analysis and development with the counterterrorism investigations and operational support activities. CTC is responsible for collection of evidence, carrying out examinations of crime scenes, interviewing suspects, witnesses, and conducting searches for physical evidence. The source of this special counterterrorism investigation in the UK begins when MI5 and the Special Branch uncover a plot while acquiring and assessing covert intelligence. They then consult Scotland Yard's CTC, which coordinates between the UK police force involved, oversees the evidence in the case against the subject, based on the public threat or intelligence considerations, determines if police action is required. If so, the CTC and the Crown Prosecution Service execute a successful arrest and subsequent prosecution, while MI5 and the special branches continue to gather intelligence revealed during the investigation and court case. Major covert terrorist investigations are organized according to three primary functions: government strategy, operational command, and tactical command. The government strategy is orchestrated at Cabinet Office briefing rooms, activated during national emergencies of crisis and chaired by the Prime Minister or Home Secretary in the event of a major terrorist threat. The frequency of the meetings depends entirely on the operational situation, but generally meets daily during the latter stages of an operation. The Cabinet Officer briefing rooms is tasked with providing high-level interaction between police, law enforcement, and intelligence officials during major investigations, coordinate the government strategy, ensure appropriate inter-ministry cooperation, and brief the Prime Minister of the situation at hand. The Executive Liaison Groups conduct operational command. The Executive Liaison Groups is chaired by the National Coordinator of Counterterrorism and includes officials from MI5, the CTC, and officials from the police force involved in the investigation. The ELG is tasked with dictating the investigative strategy, ensuring proper coordination between evidentiary and intelligence interests, delegate operational authority as necessary, and consider community outreach and press-related issues. The joint operation teams are deployed at the police headquarters of the force whose area of operation is running or conducting tactical command. This 4P strategy of counterterrorism in the UK has been developed over the course of almost 100 years of experience, but is drawn mostly from the time of the Troubles. After 9/11 and the 7 July attacks, several modifications were made to transition the UK's approach to counterterrorism from the IRA threat to that posed by Al-Qaeda, its affiliates, and like-minded individuals. Some have argued that this strategy that the UK has developed is superior to the way counterterrorism is handled in the United States. What do you think? That is going to be the subject of this week's discussion post.